Yeah. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is an AU Core information session. These are different to what have been TDG meetings and work group meetings. This is an informal kind of conversation around a new kind of a fire resource type, in this case, composition, where we're going to talk about what it is, what it does, have you implemented it, what might you use it for? And at any point in time, put your hand up, ask questions. The whole point here isn't to like make voting decisions, but it's to talk about what this thing is. And the best thing that can happen is that you have a better understanding of if this is relevant to you and what we should do with it. So that's the goal for today. So I'm going to hand over to Heath, who's going to take us through um, composition. What is it? How does it work? Does anybody have questions? That's what we're going to go through.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so as Danielle said, this is a information session on a proposed AU core composition profile. Just to get started, I'd like to just do a bit of a Menti just to get to know who's on the call, and also what your interest is in a composition resource as an AU core profile. So if you can scan this barcode or go to menti.com and enter in the Menti number 72351131. So initially just looking at what role you most identify with, guess more from a professional perspective than anything else. And that'll just help us sort of get a bit of a sense of the types of people on the call and what our audience is. Pretty widespread at the moment. You can actually select multiple roles. Quite common that we have a lot of architects here. So I've got 20 out of 22, so I think I might move forward. Just give it a slight delay in case someone's still trying to get in, but I will move forward now. How well do you know the following? So, are you a beginner or expert around fire, or AU core, or AU patient summary? And I guess on topic is what do you know? How much do you know about fire composition resource type in general? So we've got a lot of almost experts. And they're not owning up to being experts. Looking at the list, I'm surprised at that.
Now, I got to say, I actually said I was an expert on AU Core. I think we're just seeing the averaged out.
Oh, I think the thickness of the line there kind of indicates. Looks like you're the only one.
I mean, fair, I did write it, so one would hope that I thought I was an expert on AU Core from like working with the community and authoring it. Um,
No experts in fire, which is very surprising.
You think? Fire's really big, like fire's really broad. So I would think that there are a whole bunch of people who are expert in their particular area. I mean, I know, for example, I mean, we've got Angus on the line. We've got like people from Orion Health, and they've done some great stuff with fire. But saying you're an expert across like all of fire is, I think, a big ask.
Lots of almost experts, which is great. And yeah, someone's claiming that they're an expert on composition. That's awesome. And lots down on the on the back end, which is also awesome on a beginner. So I think we've got 20 out of 24, so I might move forward to the next one. So what use cases involving composition are important for you? So I guess if you're only a beginner and here to find out more about composition, more than you don't necessarily need to do this, but um, at the same time, if you think you might know what a composition is, I would love to still see what you think it might be important for you to be. It's a good response. Don't know yet. Well, hopefully we will give you little bit more idea on it, and we are going to get pretty deep and meaningful straight away. So, but if you've got questions, please don't um, hold back on your questions if you really are starting at the very beginning on this journey around composition. We can certainly tone this back a little bit. AU patient summary is not surprising. Fire documents, clinical notes. Ratch. I'm assuming that's aged care. Yeah,
Oh, that's why my
sense.
hand is up. Yeah, I wanted to ask for the person who did that. Is that residential aged care?
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Yes, yes, it is.
Very good. Alrighty. So 16 out of 26. I might just give it a little bit more time here, but I will move on pretty quickly. Labs, maybe. Okay, so last one. I think it's last one. Other than patient summary, does your system? I've struggled with this question. Does your system or do you intend to implement composition? So does your system implement composition or do you intend to implement composition is what I'm trying to actually ask you.
Now, I'm just going to say we've carried on the green tradition of losing a single character. Not at this Tim, is I'm assuming not at this time.
That's my copy from last time. Yeah. Tim's not even on the call. Probably should have put an extra one in there around patient summary as a specific one. So, but I'm interested to see that there's yes, we do now. Oh, there's zero. So, it's good to see intention to do so. Okay, so we'll move on. So thank you very much for that. Um, okay, so this is about a proposal for an AU core composition profile, and I just put a few notes up here on why, what needs to be done, why we should do it, what the impacts are of adding this profile into AU core, and I guess to some extent, why now? So what needs to be done? We need to, as we do in all our AU core profiles, we need to specify some the elements that it must support. We also need to articulate what the obligations are. Um, so as a responder slash server, how you when you need to populate and what the in particular that it's a shell populate if known, etc. And as a requester, the our standard obligation is to not error. And value sets bindings if there are, and I'm going to propose that there is a value set binding for the composition type, and we also need to look at search parameters. So that pretty much sets our agenda for today, is moving through those four items in turn. So why, and probably more importantly, why now? So we do the requirement of exchanging FHIR documents beyond patient summary is growing. We certainly know that the digital agency is looking at having different types of documents in this space. And having an AU core composition profile that all FHIR documents can derive from will ensure that we've got some consistency and stability for systems that are implementing a generalized FHIR document solution. So rather than just implementing for patient summaries, that perhaps those implementers want to do this in a generic way so that they can handle any kind of FHIR document coming into their systems. And I guess getting ahead of the curve to some extent before we have too many different types of documents out there, and things like categorizing what these document types are, for example. So a composition is basically used to collect together or compose effectively a document. And we'll go into the structures of it a little bit, but basically it enables us to um, put some narrative and structured content into um, the composition resource. And when we say the structured documents, we're talking about referencing the structured data that we already have, those conditions, those allergies, those medication resources that we already have in our FHIR server or in our electronic health record, and then just referencing those, but then putting some narrative around that so that we can actually have a human readable representation of the data that's in this um, composition. So starting, I guess, straight into it, and I might just pause. Is there any questions so far, I guess, around why we are doing this now and why we're doing it at all, or even what is a composition? Okay, given no questions, I'll move on. So we do have an AU-based composition. So what I'm proposing with this AU core composition is that we do derive from AU base, as we always do. And AU base, I can pull it up, but um, basically AU base has a fairly minimal um, representation at the moment. And um, so just bear with me while I do pull that up. Just need to focus while I do it. Um, the main thing that we do in AU base is define extensions for Australian purposes and bindings, value sets, bindings. So that's why there isn't really a lot said in the AU base profile at this point, because there is um, only one, oh, there's two. So there's one binding here. So let's go to the differential. So that
We did
doesn't
one
actually,
thing. Yep, just
one
one
thing.
thing.
So the differential view gives us that one thing, and that is adding this extension of information recipient in here. I what I was thinking that there was a constraint on the binding, but actually no, that is we've inherited that binding from FHIR core. So that might be something that we'll look at in a little bit. So we've got some elements along the line here, and I've only just given you a bit of an outline of the elements that I think at this point in time that are considered for being must support. And the rationale for this is pretty much I've looked at what we've got in AU patient summary, and which of those elements we should consider, and that might have more general applicability for other use cases other than patient summary. So that is really the starting point. I can certainly look at the full set of elements, but what I would like to do initially is just focus on the ones that I think should be most important. And really, I'm very much want you to tell me if my proposal should not include them. Um, and also, there's a couple of cardinalities here that I've put in as well. And certainly, we'll have some debate around those as well. Danielle.
Now, I realize you've just asked a question, and I wanted to say something that is not a response to that question. So, if people do have a response to that, they can absolutely go first. Um, I I think I wanted to raise what I put in the chat because I am very interested about that composition, while every time I've seen it is in a document sharing paradigm, it's not limited to it. I don't know if anyone else has seen it or used it in a way or has a need for grouping things that is not document sharing, because I think that would also be really helpful for driving how much we constrain this in AU Core. Are we narrowing down a document or are we leaving it open? So I wanted to ask the people on the call about that. Angus.
Uh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that point is where I really struggle with composition and document is where the boundary is between it all being in a bundle and it's an immutable thing and the use case of the resources in it being exploded, if you will, into a fire server. And the line between those two, I really struggle with.
I mean, I think it's almost the critical point for what are we doing in AU Core. Because it's incredibly useful as a grouper, like list is. It's a grouper, it sets context, and we don't have to turn it into document. Which I guess I think you set that context, Heath, but just I guess reminder for those folks that don't talk about file documents, day in, day out. That makes things kind of immutable and versioned. Um, so I know there was some interest at one of the Sparked face-to-face meetings in Hobart around having a way to group things that was like a living document that was kept up to date. Oh, I guess I should stop using the word document there. There was like a living collection of things related to a certain encounter that was kept up to date. And I see, Ricardo, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. Question maybe for you, Heath. So why not go for section mandatory? Is there a reason behind that?
We'll get to that.
Yep. Okay.
And
I
I
mean,
think,
admittedly, I have
yep,
exactly the same question, Ricardo.
and I think in fact it kind of comes back to what Daniel's maybe talking about to some extent is within your system, as you're composing this document, it's still a live composition. It's a draft. So is there a point in the life cycle of this composition where there is no section yet because all you've actually filled out is potentially the recipient and so the patient and the author and stuff.
Are
But
you thinking like maybe discharge summaries where we know that gets initiated in a system well before we've got everything all together?
that it's not yet a bundled up into a document,
Hmm.
literally. So yeah, it's an interesting. I actually hadn't thought about it that way, but definitely we're going to get to, it should sections be mandatory, um, and by doing so, it does perhaps limit that empty composition within a system before it's fully um, populated.
So to a degree, let's just for some of the people on the line who aren't who have more of a clinical bent or a consumer representative focus. One of the differences between forcing a section by making it mandatory, which we absolutely may want to do, or by leaving it optional, is that the resource, so the resource without a without a section could perhaps be used to advertise in maybe even a record locator service that something is happening here or in some other fashion before it's actually ready to be shared. Um, and I guess it's also a question of whether or not there's an event-based component to that, and we would want to use composition to share that information before we're actually sharing the real information that comes out of that. It's an interesting question on where we're going to land in AU Core. And I see Rob's hand is up.
Yes. Hi, folks. I just want to follow up on your question, Danielle, about the scope. And I wonder whether, and I don't know the answer to that, but I wonder whether we need to get to the bottom of the scope of the proposal for composition in AU Core. Does it intend to be just restricted to document, which would give it potentially different constraints than if it's the broader scope, then yeah, different constraints again. And I think we need to probably nut that out to work out where this goes. I don't know what's people's thinking about that.
I mean, my thought is that is absolutely the right question. That's one of the basic questions we need to be asking around what are we trying to the scope of what we're trying to put some rules around.
Can you just ask your question again, Rob, please?
Yes, sure. Just really Danielle's question, and it hadn't occurred to me. You know, my previous understanding, or my limited understanding of composition, was really strictly speaking about document. But no, it's not. As Danielle pointed out, it can be used for other purposes. So therefore, that kind of implies what is the intent for the proposal for AU Core? Is it to just be limited to documents? So potentially that could imply the, AU Core composition document or document composition, from a guardrail perspective, scope basically, or is it intended to be much broader, which would satisfy a document-based paradigm perspective as well as other varieties as well. So I don't know. Again, I don't know the answer to that. I was just kind of posing that, and I think that's a kind of a crucial point to kind of agree upon. So therefore, if it is scoped to be just document, then we know, okay, inside of a document paradigm, these constraints would be naturally, following probably. Whereas if it's broader, it would be a different discussion. Yeah, that's all.
Well, thank you, Rob, because I would like you to go to the Menti and actually answer the question. What do everyone think?
My comment's just to follow what one from Rob's and Danielle's, and that if it's thing is there's enough thing for document focus, should there be a specific profile composition document and then composition or a broader composition profile than a specific one for composition document?
Yeah. And keeping in mind that when I've actually done this presentation down in Hobart and at the face-to-face TDG. So we are revisiting sort of what I've already done somewhat. And I did present also a bundle profile because in that context, I was doing them hand in hand. So again, I was probably making an assumption that we were doing it in the context of documents. But as we went through that workshop, and in particular in the context of Encounter Records, there was a lot of desire to be able to get access to Encounter record data through APIs and not have necessarily the document-orientated view of the world. Like having things persistent, having things available um, in parts, I guess, to some extent, and very early in the document lifecycle. So we had an ambulance scenario where they were wanting to hand over their ambulance encounter record to the emergency department before they'd actually completed the entire document, and hence, turned it into that final readable version of the document. So some reflections on that was, could we just have this composition available through the APIs without actually being part of an encounter for that kind of live nature of things? So that was actually an interesting conversation, and it's interesting that Danielle's brought that back to this session. Rob, you still got your hand up. I'm not sure if I can't see an order of people. Maybe I should be able. So Angus, you seem to be next.
This is kind of what I said before is I find it a really blurry line between, like, I think it's the complexity of the document being more than just not immutable, but more than just a bundle of resources. Like if it's a bundle, if composition is used in a bundle and all the resources are in the bundle and the whole thing is a package you can give to someone and say, there's a document, I think that's easier to rationalize with. As soon as you start blurring this line between some of the resources are in the bundle, some are not, and they're referenced outside of the bundle, I feel like that gets really into implementation land and very vague as to, like, what is a document when it is a hybrid like that. And I wonder whether, for pure complexity reasons, that is an implementation thing that people would have to maybe play with. But if you're moving a document from A to B, it's an entire bundle with all the resources in it, or it's stored in a server at the bundle endpoint. But this hybrid idea, I think we can all vision it, but to define it, I think, is really difficult.
Yeah, I certainly struggled with the idea of a final composition still having data that it references being live and changing underneath. And I know that there are some rules that in Firecore that addresses that particular issue, but turning it into the immutable document gets away, basically puts it in at a point in time, and hence you don't have that problem with knowing what was the data at the time when that document was originally written. So that's interesting. I have some concerns also, Angus. Yoni.
Thanks, Sid. I definitely share Angus' point here about the definition. To bring back the clinical, your point about the ambulance was very valid from a desirability point of view. But and look, there are more examples, right? Like there could be an interim radiology report that then becomes a radiology final report after they've checked it. There could be a pathologist report that then become a complete pathology report. So on the clinical side, sure, I can understand why people would want that. However, to define that is going to be almost potentially too convoluted. Like, I don't know if there is one definition for the hybrid approach that will sort of fit everywhere. And I'm not sure at this stage it should be entertained, but that's just my opinion on that, because I'm not sure what clinical scenarios will be able to solve that way that it's not going to impact another clinical scenario.
Michael?
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with people who have just spoken. The document use case is a known use case. Like we understand that, we know what it's for. The other one is something that's not well established, not well known, that I'll kind of think exactly what Yoni's just said, we would grapple with exactly what we're trying to get out of that. So I feel like actually constraining it to document would clearly set the boundary and what its intended use for. That doesn't stop us having another profile in the future that may be more generic or used for different use cases. but having it trying to sit in the middle and be something to everything, but the everything we don't really know what it even could be or how it could be used could be problematic.
It feels a little bit like in e-requesting when we talked about draft, right? Like a document in draft is not something interoperable. Like people can have a document in draft and the resources can be in all weird places, and that's fine on their progression to eventually creating a pure document that is passed to someone. It's not saying people won't do it, but it's kind of that's the construction of a document world, and then there's many, 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 many ways to do that. But at the end of the day, you need to pass a document to someone, and at that point, it has to be a self-contained document. So both things exist in the world, but we can't define how to construct a document, the temporary steps to get there. We can only define the endpoint, which is I've now got a document I'm going to hand to someone.
Marvin?
So, given there's a lot of, I guess, confusion about how we might use it, does it make sense to create an AU core profile for composition, and should we just leave it as AU base and then allow the downstream IG? So patient summary has a use case for it. So we have a patient summary composition. And if we have some other interesting use case, then that IG defines the composition appropriately for it. What's going to be the benefit of us having an AU core composition?
I would be happy. That's not why I put my hand up, but it's kind of related. I would say that question is exactly why we do it in AU Core. We've got this question. It's a fundamental question on how are we using composition across digital health sharing. And I think it is important to solve if we actually want to share things with composition. So I think that for me, I have even more of a driver. I mean, I thought it was good, but I'm feeling much more strongly that this is much more useful to put in AU Core based on these kind of fundamental scope and usage questions. I think that's why AU Core exists.
So do you think we'll get to a point there where AU core composition is just a touch more constrained than AU base? And
I think it's going
then
to be a
further,
lot more constrained than AU Base, to be
Mhm.
quite frank. AU Base does nothing but say, maybe you could use this extension. That's it. In AU Core, we will need to identify a minimum set of supported elements. If we go to document paradigm and sharing for documents, we're going to need to talk about the ways in which you can discover these things. We're going to need to talk about some of the terminology that supports the content within Australia, and discovery processes across servers. We're going to need to identify things around narrative. And I very muchly suspect a bunch of some real basic just cardinalities like, yes, you have a subject, yes, you have an author, that aren't actually constrained within AU base. So, yeah, I think there's going to be quite a few constraints to
yeah,
just get a minimum operating line.
I think that's a fair comment that there are some things that a composition probably really does need in order to make it actually useful. And maybe that's what we stick into AU core. But I think if we're going to get down to the position of trying to define composition for a specific use case, that might be quite hard.
Oh yeah, no, I think we have to, and sorry, just before we go to Angus, I mean we have to avoid that in AU Core. AU Core has to be use case inclusive. It needs to be appropriate across multiple different sets of use cases, so it cannot restrict it so far that you restrict meaningful use. Um, we need to be clear on what the scope of what we think the meaningful use for this profile is, and then put those requirements in.
Yeah.
Angus.
To throw cat amongst the pigeons, it's interesting that there's three paradigms in FHIR. There's the RESTful paradigm, the document paradigm, and the message paradigm. And I'd argue that most of the industry does the message paradigm, but no one's talking about that. We're talking about the document paradigm, which we do. My health record's all document paradigm. Some of the message paradigm people could argue probably should have been done with document paradigm. But I find it interesting we're all corralling around we need a document paradigm. Everyone's interested in a message paradigm.
Could I respond to that?
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to this. One is the actual sharing mechanism, and one is the content in and of itself. I think you can do documents like fire documents with a messaging kind of sharing paradigm. And I don't think that discounts anything that we might need to do in AU Core around having like a basic minimum. And if that's a thing that is a use case we want to put in place, or I guess maybe, sorry, recognize as a reasonable use case, then we should consider what that would mean for like the content requirements around our sections mandatory, etc., to ensure that the fire document bundle, if you will, could be shared using a messaging sharing paradigm.
I guess the work I'm doing is a good example of this. And so pathology and radiology reports moving around. Today, they all move around in HL7 messages, and people are starting to convert those messages into fire. And then do they go into fire documents? Do they not? Do they go into fire message? It kind of seems one to one. They go into a fire message. People toy with the idea of document. Yeah, I think it's very blurred. Like, is a pathology report in a V2 message, is that a document? Is that a message? I think it's very vague. And that's why I was talking the cat behind the pigeons, and I don't want to derail it, but I just wanted to throw that out there. What do we all think we actually do today, even though we're sitting here looking at documents? I don't think there's a good answer to it.
I mean, I guess I just refer back to the presentation I did in Hobart again around the characteristics of clinical documents. So, and I think Stephen put some stuff in the chat there around one of them, and it's about the persistence. It's about being able to sign all those, etc. I'm just trying to find the slide that summarized that in the background here. I'll let Brett talk, and then I'll see if I can find that slide.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Angus's point. I think messages come with triggers and responsibilities, right? So
Yep.
I think it's a bit different. Documents do not have that, right? So yeah.
Hence why I was trying to find what are the characteristics of a document, which are very different to the characteristics of a message, as you've explained, Brett. So, is it where like I think that was a really useful conversation. I don't necessarily. If there's more to be said, I'm happy to do it, but I wonder if it's worth to ask this same question again after that conversation. Whether people are clearer, because there was a lot of don't knows in the previous answer, and whether
still
people
don't know.
now are clearer.
I'm not. But I think it's something we could elect to do.
I'm personally with the documents only. Sorry, I don't have Menti at the moment.
Yeah, just give me a couple of moments. I'd put my phone down. I didn't realize we would be doing more of these.
Yeah, so that's changed it. I guess while that's still going on, I referenced this list of what is a fire document, and after this conversation, I'm wondering whether I should have actually run through this set of slides. What is a fire document first? But which I can pivot if people would like me to do that. We can get to the details of the profile another day. But my point of this is a fire clinical document there is a FHIR clinical document implementation guide published by FHIR. There are two things that we talk about: FHIR documents, and there is this FHIR clinical document. So FHIR documents is a FHIR core concept, and as Angus was talking about, it's a paradigm. There's messaging, there's REST, there's document paradigms. So FHIR documents is related to that paradigm. And then FHIR clinical documents is actually taken that FHIR paradigm and turned it into something that is equivalent or close to equivalent to the original concept of clinical CDA, clinical document architecture, that we're currently using with My Health Record, for example. And these are the characteristics that the FHIR Clinical Document Implementation Guide just talks about for a FHIR clinical document. So it's about persistence, remaining unaltered for a period of time, and stewardship being maintained by a custodian, the potential for authentication, such as digitally signing it, and approvals. It's context, it's establishing context around the contents of this. Now, we're talking about the metadata, right? What kind of document is this? Who's it for? Where was it done? What was the event, the care event associated with it? So that's the context associated with the content within this document. Wholeness was something that we struggled with in Hobart, and I still don't know that I can articulate it any better than I previously tried, other than the fact that it is the whole document that is, the information in the document you cannot consider without the rest of the document. There is also this aspect of, you're signing the whole, not parts of the document. And finally, it's the human readability. So there is narrative that we populate, and there's a mechanism. We've got things like patient summary viewers at the moment that use basic rules defined by FHIR core, that says how you actually render a FHIR document, and hence that's incorporated in the clinical documents. Danielle.
I wanted to say that I understand these, and I think a whole bunch of FHIR folks get those items. I was at a table with a bunch of clinical people and a couple of government policy people who really, those terms are incredibly unfamiliar to them. You're on a totally different slide.
Yep.
By the way, things around wholeness and so forth. So, I think for a very technical audience, I think these terms will work. Where we were in Hobart, which was like a joint CDG, TDG experience with government policy, I can see what we did struggle. And I think that if we're going to do that again and put any of these kind of concepts in front of outside of a vendor implementation audience, we will need to do some work on that.
Danielle, I had used some wording in something else I was doing around fixed, human readable, verifiable record. That was the kind of, sort of high level view of what the document was.
Okay, so where do we want to go here? Michael, you still got no?
No, sorry, I'm just trying to work out how to pull my hand down.
Angus.
I just wanted to make one other statement to be clear, is the searchability of documents is very different to the searchability of resources in a FHIR server. People agree with that? Like, when you say it's just a document in a bundle, the ability to search on that document through all the content within it is very limited compared to when it's not a document and it's in a FHIR server. Highlighting that difference. People disagree with that difference. That's my understanding, is once it's a document really have very little metadata to search on it with. Is that true? I think that's true.
You're searching on the context, for lack of a better word. I mean, I was trying to stay away from metadata.
Oh, no, let's say it. We don't have to avoid it. This is a tech audience, largely. We can just
yeah.
say metadata and we can mean things that for a different audience, like if we include reason for encounter or facility location might be thought of as clinical concepts, but I think for the tech people, because we're considering really how do we search, we're thinking that they're part of metadata.
Yeah, and I guess the main thing I'm putting up this slide again is that you can't query the individual resources, right? So discoverability or the querying capability of documents is just as powerful as any other resource, except you can't go into the sections. So you can query on the composition data, metadata. You can query on the bundle metadata, but you can't query it necessarily on the conditions within it, because that would be just painful. I mean, using chaining and all those sorts of things, in theory, it's possible, but yeah, it would be a burden on the server. So that's why this list here, when not to use a document, is when you're actually wanting to query. Also, when you're wanting to update individual resources, because effectively you have to repackage the entire document again for your exchange mechanisms. And also the other one that I would point out is this actionable requests. So if you're putting a medication request into a document, that medication request is not actionable.
Yes, no. And that's part of what I think Angus is asking, which goes beyond document paradigm to sharing. Are we going to allow dual means to find things? Can I find my prescription via just a search for prescription, or can I ask for it in a via, I don't know, docref kind of exposure that I would then get a composition, but inside it, it would have a full like ETP thing. Obviously, that's not AU Core is not dealing with the ETP, but I think we're kind of talking about exposure and searching, and that there can be both a document paradigm means of finding things, as well as allowing things like diagnostic reports or prescriptions that have almost a one-to-one on what their actual fire resource is to go find them. It's a good question. The US has landed on a particular way of allowing both. And I think the introduction for us of composition, and I know we're going to talk about DocRef, will lead down that conversation pathway. Or Angus actually is, because I think that's also what you were getting at. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, I felt you can't, like, I obviously live in the pathology radiology space, and if I put it all in a document, I felt I couldn't say give me all documents where hemoglobin is 10. Like, that's just not possible, I think. Like, I can say give me all documents where the patient is this patient, because that's up in the header information, but is the sections, can you drill into the sections of a bundle?
Theoretically, with the
custom
existing
parameters,
fire
you can
search
do
types,
it.
if we don't create any, you could ask for like the test code. That is possible. Going any further down, not so much. So we could say, yeah, give us all things we know about this patient that has this test code. And that would still be findable using a document paradigm.
And is that because
I would argue that you would extract out your data from the document and then apply the appropriate. I mean, in theory, using FirePath and all those sorts of things, anything's possible, but it's a matter of, is it actually reasonable?
Yeah, but that's not an answer, Heath. To say, oh, you can build a site indexing system, like, yeah, sure, we can do anything, but that's my point, is out of the box, document is limited in its search, as
out
opposed
of the
to
box, native fire search can find like the service type basically, and you say the service type is the test code. So you can go this test happened, find me the record related to this test. You can do it if we agree to it.
Because we've predetermined that test type is the thing we want to search on, not dynamically later decided. Is that?
Well, yes. So that's part of going into must support and agreeing on what systems would actually support searching on. So it's a native Fire search parameter. Out of the box, servers would enable the search. What that would be up to us in AU Core is to say, well, no, you have to support it, and here's the terminology. We want you to be capable of doing it. That's what we would need to do. Yeah.
I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole, to be honest, but Marvin,
Oh, I was
you've
just
tried to respond to Angus a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just responding to Angus and saying you can, with custom search parameters, search into a document. And so what you'd be returning was, give me all the documents with this particular resource and code for this resource. So you can do that.
Okay, and that's a really fair point, right? And to me, that's kind of a bit like what Heath was saying, like, but it's a better solution, right? Like, it's predetermined that we in the IG have said that you will support these custom search parameters. It's not like the normal Fire endpoints where the standard search parameters are there, and after the thought, you can go, I can go search on this search parameters just because it's part of Fire. Like, you have to make the pre-decisions up front. These are the things people will search on, not come along later and just this stuff's indexed for me already. Which
that's correct. Yeah.
And that's all I'm trying to point out is understanding that unlike the resource endpoints here, searching is a upfront decision that you have to make.
As usual, Fire's defined what are our search parameters. So we can look at section codes, and that's it, right? So going inside a section, there's not a mechanism to, there's an entry. So yes, we can go in. And of course we've got chaining.
You can totally chain that search sheet. That's what I was going to say. Like a regular Fire server, you can do that.
But that's why I'm saying, is it viable? Okay.
I mean, if you have a regular Fire server, it is.
Well,
and you've got to search on composition.
What sort of resources are you throwing at it?
Yeah, if you're a legacy system, you're going to have a hard time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's a regular Fire server? Is that Telltale Smile? I don't know. What's a regular one?
Anything's possible, Angus, in software. Yeah. Marvin, sorry, we've 4 minutes to go. So next steps, I guess. So I didn't even get started. How do we move forward? I'm really interested in how to go forward on this.
I think you did, though. The point of this was to talk about composition and how does it get used, and I think that's exactly what we did.
Yep.
Right. So I think this has been a fantastic information session, and maybe we need to put hands up. Do we do another one?
Well, I was going to suggest one next week.
Yeah. Next
how far you want to take it, because I think this was good. I think most people are feeling that it's more suited to the document paradigm, and maybe that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the results were quite conclusive this time for me.
Maybe that's all we need. If we're going forward with the document paradigm, then maybe we don't need another info session. We can schedule one, noting next Friday is, I think, Easter Friday, so not next week,
okay.
or at least not next Friday.
The point really is that we've got a lot of information sessions. We've got another one in 2 weeks' time around document reference, which I think would be useful to have done this, got some sort of progress on this one before we actually do document reference, because I think they're related. So again, it comes down to how many meetings do we have, but would people be in favor of maybe a Thursday session next week? Or are people going off for an early Easter?
Okay, so I guess that's a request for people in Zoom to put your hand up if you would love to come back and chat about composition next Thursday.
No.
I'm not seeing it.
No,
Oh no, there's
next
one.
Thursday has an AU core meeting.
It does.
It'll
Yeah.
be in the afternoon, I guess.
Seeing a couple.
I'm intrigued in it. I mean, it's something that I can't say that I'll have the time, but I'm interested in it.
What if we popped out a Zulip poll to say when? So next week sometime, and we said like Thursday this time, or gave a couple of other options for people.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative is that we postpone the document reference one. Do people feel like we should try and work on this one before we do document reference, or can we do document reference without this one?
I think we've clearly got enough. I mean, there's been enough hands in the chat of double digits that would indicate that we would support having the opportunity for a further discussion.
Next week. Okay.
Yeah.
Certainly more interested in document reference because I think it has even wider use cases, right? Like PDFs and all this other stuff. Like it can point to a fire document and it's the whole kettle of worms we talked about today, but document reference is far more, it's far more use case, I feel.
I think we have to do both.
Yeah, I agree. We have to do both.
All right, so Heath, if you're happy to, let's put out a poll for I guess the second iteration of the AU Core Composition info session next week for when people can make it.
So I know we're at time, but do we feel like we need to go back a step before we can move forward? So I guess where I was looking to get to, or at least start, is to get some agreement on what are the must support elements. Do we still need to continue this conversation about what this is, or do we feel we've nailed that and we can now move forward with working out what elements are must support, look at bindings and search parameters?
I think we should try doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Heath, do you reckon we should try and just make a statement of scope and then everyone can go, yeah, that's it? And then
I think that might be a good introduction to the next session. Thanks for that suggestion, Brett. Awesome. All right, I think I had something along those lines. I just don't have a slide with it. So I think that would be a good start, is to actually work out what the scope is.
Given we're sort of tiptoeing around document reference composition, are we also considering binary just because document maybe I feel document reference goes well with binary?
So no one had brought that up. It's a goodie. But nobody's raised it except for you, like right now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't deal with it now. We're over time, etc. But no, let's have a chat on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're going to close here. Thank you, everyone. That's been a great information session on composition. I think it was a really good conversation. We will shortly put a poll out on Zulip, which is chat.fire.org, for people, where we will try to fix when the next chat on AU Core Composition is. There is already an information session on document reference. If you don't have the meeting invite for that, it is actually on the calendar for AU Fire Work Group. That's in a fortnight from today, same time. That's when that is. And I think, as Heath has pointed out, these are really related.
And a quick question as well. Is everyone okay with me sending out another invite, because it is appearing in our calendars as cancelled at the moment? I understand that that's been a pain in the butt, but yeah, I just
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
think
work
it's
out
good.
whether that's the appropriate thing to do.
I think it's good to have another invite. Heath, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to throw you under the bus, Heath, when people complain to me about us sending too many invites, but okay.
Well, I asked and I got Stephen said yes, so
Exactly.
we're going ahead with it. It was
Oh, so
throwing
we'll
Stephen
throw,
at Stephen. Yeah.
yeah, we'll throw Stephen under the bus. Gotcha.
Onto the bus, not under the bus. I like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We're going to stop the recording, and you can expect, I think later this afternoon, there to be a Zulip poll so that you can say what time suits you.
Thank you, everyone.